Alright, taking it from where I left off last time, this will be part 3. The mechanical hound slept but did not sleep, lived but did not live in its gently humming, gently vibrating, softly illuminated kennel, back in a dark corner of the firehouse. The dim light of 1 in the morning, the moonlight from the open sky framed through the great window, touched here and there on the brass and the copper and the steel of the faintly trembling beast. Light flickered on bits of ruby glass and on sensitive capillary hairs in the nylon brushed nostrils of the creature that quivered gently, gently, its 8 legs spidered under it on rubber padded paws. Montag slid down the brass pole. He went out to look at the city, and the clouds had cleared away completely, and he lit a cigarette and came back to bend down and look at the hound. It was like a great bee come home from some field where the honey is full of poison wildness, of insanity and nightmare, its body crammed with that of the overrich nectar, and now it was sleeping, the evil out of itself. "Hello," whispered Montag, fascinated as always with the dead beast, the living beast. Nights when things got dull, which was every night, the men slid down the brass poles and set the ticking combinations of the olfactory system of the hound and let loose the rats in the firehouse areaway. And sometimes chickens and sometimes cats that would have to be drowned anyway, and there would be betting to see which of the cats, or chickens, or rats the hound would seize first. The animals were turned loose. 3 seconds later the game was done. The rat, cat, or chicken caught itself half across the areaway, gripped by gently paws, while a 4-inch hollow steel needle plunged down from the proboscis of the hound to inject massive jolts of morphine or procaine. The pawn was then tossed in the incinerator. A new game began. Montag stayed upstairs most of the nights when this went on. There had been a time 2 years ago when he had bet with the best of them, and lost a week's salary and faced Mildred's insane anger, which showed itself in veins and blotches. But now nights he lay in his bunk, face turned to the wall, listening to the whoops of laughter below, the piano string scurry of rat feet, the violin squeaking of mice, and the great shadowing, mentioned silence, of the hound leaping out like a moth in the raw light, finding, holding its victim, inserting the needle and going back to its kennel to die, as if a switch had been turned. Montag touched the muzzle. The hound growled. Montag jumped back. The hound half rose in its kennel and looked at him, with green-blue neon lights flickering in its suddenly activated eye bulbs. It growled again. A strange rasping combination of electrical sizzle, a frying sound, a scraping of metal, a turning of cogs that seemed rusty and ancient with suspicion. "No, no, boy," said Montag, his heart pounding. He saw the silver needle extend upon the air an inch, pull back, extend, pull back. The growl simmered in the beast, and it looked at him. Montag backed up. The hound took a step from its kennel. Montag grabbed the brass pole with one hand. The pole, reacting, slid upward and took him through the ceiling quietly. He stepped off in the half-lit deck of the upper level. He was trembling and his face was green-white. Below, the hound had sunk back upon its 8 incredible insect legs and was humming to itself again, its multifaceted eyes at peace. Montag stood, letting the fears pass by the drop hole. Behind him, 4 men at a card table under the green-lidded light in the corner glanced briefly but said nothing. Only the man with the captain's hat and the sign of the phoenix on his hat, at last curious, his playing cards in his thin hand, talked across the long room. "Montag?" "It doesn't like me," said Montag. "What, the hound?" The captain studied his cards. "Come off it. It doesn't like or dislike. It just functions. It's like a lesson in ballistics. It has a trajectory we decide on for it. It follows through. It targets itself, hones itself, and cuts off. It's only copper wire, storage batteries, and electricity." Montag swallowed. Its calculators can be set to any combination. So many amino acids, so much sulfur, so much butterfat and alkaline, right? We all know that. All those chemical balances and percentages on all of us here in the house are recorded in the master file downstairs. It would be easy for someone to set up a partial combination on the hound's memory, a touch of amino acids perhaps. That would account for what the animal did just now, reacted toward me. "Hell," said the captain. "Irritated, but not completely angry, just enough memory to set up in it by someone so it growled when I touched it." "Who would do a thing like that?" asked the captain. "You haven't any enemies here, Guy." "Not that I know of." "We'll have the hound checked by our technicians tomorrow." "This isn't the first time it's threatened me," said Montag. "Last month it happened twice. We'll fix it up, don't worry." But Montag did not move and only stood thinking of the ventilator grill in the hall at home and what lay hidden behind the grill. If someone here in the firehouse knew about the ventilator, then mightn't they tell the hound? The captain came over to the drop hole and gave Montag a questioning glance. "I was just figuring," said Montag. What does the hound think about down there nights? Is it coming alive on us, really? It makes me cold. It doesn't think anything we don't want it to think. That's sad, said Montag quietly, because all we put into it is hunting and finding and killing. What a shame if that's all it can ever know. Beatty snorted gently. Hell, it's a fine bit of craftsmanship, a good rifle that can fetch its own target and guarantees the bullseye every time. That's why, said Montag, I wouldn't want to be its next victim. Why? You got a guilty conscience about something? Montag glanced up swiftly. Beatty stood there, looking at him steadily with his eyes, while his mouth opened and began to laugh very softly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days, and as many times as he came out of the house and Clarice was there somewhere in the world. Once he saw her shaking a walnut tree, once he saw her sitting on the lawn knitting a blue sweater 3 or 4 times. He found a bouquet of late flowers on his porch, or a handful of chestnuts in a little sack, or some autumn leaves neatly pinned to a sheet of white paper and thumbtacked to his door. Every day Clarice walked him to the corner. One day it was raining, the next it was clear. The day after that the wind blew strong, and the day after that it was mild and calm. And the day after that, the calm day, was a day like the furnace of summer, and Clarice with her face all sunburnt by late afternoon. Why is it, he said, one time at the subway entrance, I feel I've known you so many years. Because I like you, she said, and I don't want anything from you, and because we know each other. You make me feel very old and very much like a father. Now you can explain, she said, why you haven't any daughters like me if you love children so much. I don't know. You're joking. I mean, he stopped and shook his head. Well, my wife, she just never wanted any children at all. The girl stopped smiling. I'm sorry. I really thought you were having fun at my expense. I'm a fool. No, he said. It was a good question. It's been a long time since anyone's cared enough to ask. Good question. Let's talk about something else. Have you ever smelled old leaves? Don't they smell like cinnamon? Here, smell. Why, yes, it is like cinnamon in a way. She looked at him with her dark, clear eyes. You always seem shocked. It's just that I haven't had time. Did you look at the stretched out billboards like I told you? I think so. Yes. He had to laugh. Your laugh sounds much nicer than it did. Does it? Much more relaxed. He felt at ease and comfortable. Why aren't you in school? I see you every day wandering around. Oh, they don't miss me, she said. I'm antisocial, they say. I don't mix. It's so strange. I'm very social indeed. It all depends on what you mean by social, doesn't it? Social to me means talking to you about things like this. She rattled some chestnuts that had fallen off a tree in the front yard. Or talking about how strange the world is. Being with people is nice, but I don't think it's social to get a bunch of people together and then not talk to them, you know? An hour of TV class, an hour of basketball or baseball or running, another hour of transcription history or painting pictures and more sports. But do you know, we never ask questions, or at least most don't. They just run the answers at you. Bing, 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 and us sitting there for 4 more hours of film, teacher. That's not social to me at all. It's a lot of funnels and a lot of water poured down the spout and out the bottom, and them telling us it's wine when it's not. They run us so ragged by the end of the day we can't do anything but go to bed or head for a fun park to bully people around, break window panes in the window smasher place, or wreck cars in the car wrecker place with the big steel ball, or rout in the cars and race on the streets, trying to see how close you can get to the lampposts, playing chicken and knock hubcaps. I guess I'm everything they say I am, all right. I haven't any friends. That's supposed to prove I'm abnormal, but everyone I know is either shouting or dancing around like wild or beating up one another. Do you notice how people hurt each other nowadays? You sound so very odd, and so very old. Sometimes I'm ancient. I'm afraid of children my own age. They kill each other. Did it always used to be that way? My uncle says no. 6 of my friends have been shot in the last year alone. 10 of them died in car wrecks. I'm afraid of them, and they don't like me because I'm afraid. My uncle says his grandfather remembered when children didn't kill each other, but that was a long time ago when they had things different. They believed in responsibility, my uncle says. Do you know, I'm responsible. I was spanked when I needed it years ago, and I do all the shopping and house cleaning by hand. But most of all, she said, I like to watch people. Sometimes I ride the subway all day and look at them and listen to them. I just want to figure out who they are and what they want and where they're going. Sometimes I even go to the fun parks and ride in the jet cars when they race on the edge of town at midnight, and the police don't care as long as they're insured. As long as everyone has 10,000 insurance, everyone's happy. Sometimes I sneak around and listen in subways, or I listen at soda fountains. Do you know what? What? People don't talk about anything. Oh, they must. No, not anything. They name a lot of cars or clothes or swimming pools mostly, and say, how swell. But they don't say the name of the things, and nobody says anything different from anyone else. And most of the time in the caves, they have the joke boxes on and the same jokes most of the time, or the musical wall lit and all the colored patterns running up and down, but it's only color and all abstract. And at the museums, have you ever been? All abstract. That's all there is now. My uncle says it was different once. A long time back, sometimes pictures said things or even showed people. Your uncle said, your uncle said, your uncle must be a remarkable man. He is, he certainly is. Well, I've got to be going. Goodbye, Mr. Montag. Goodbye. Goodbye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days, the firehouse. Montag, you shin that pole like a bird up a tree. 3rd day. Montag, I see you came in the back door this time. The hound bother you? No, no. 4th day. Montag, a funny thing heard tell this morning. Fireman in Seattle purposely set a mechanical hound to his own chemical complex and let it loose. What kind of suicide would you call that? 5, 6, 7 days. And then Clarice was gone. He didn't know what there was about the afternoon, but it was not something seeing her somewhere in the world. The lawn was empty, the trees empty, the street empty, and while at first he did not even know he missed her or was even looking for her, the fact was that by the time he reached the subway, there were vague stirrings of disease in him. Something was the matter. His routine had been disturbed. A simple routine, true, established in a short few days, and yet he almost turned back to make the walk again, to give her time to appear. He was certain if he tried the same route, everything would work out fine, but it was late, and the arrival of his train put a stop to his plan. The flutter of cars, motion of hands, of eyelids, the drone of the time voice in the firehouse ceiling. 1:35, Thursday morning, November 4th, 1:36, 1:37 a.m. The tick of playing cards on the greasy tabletop, all the sounds came to Montag, behind his closed eyes, behind the barrier he had momentarily erected. He could feel the firehouse full of glitter and shine and silence and of brass colors, the colors of coins, of gold, of silver. The unseen men across the table were sighing on their cards, waiting. 1:45. The voice clock mourned out the cold hour of a cold morning of a still colder year. What's wrong, Montag? Montag opened his eyes. A radio hummed somewhere. War may be declared any hour. This country stands ready to defend its... The firehouse trembled as a great flight of jet planes whistled a single note across the black morning sky. Montag blinked. Beatty was looking at him as if he were a museum statue. At any moment Beatty might rise and walk about him, touching, exploring his guilt and self-consciousness. Guilt? What guilt was that? Your play, Montag. Montag looked at these men whose faces were sunburned by 1,000 real and 10,000 imaginary fires, whose work flushed their cheeks and fevered their eyes, these men who looked steadily into their platinum igniter flames as they lit their eternally burning black pipes, they and their charcoal hair and soot-colored brows and blue ash smeared cheeks where they had shaven close, but their heritage showed. Montag started up, his mouth opened. Had he ever seen a fireman that didn't have black hair, black brows, a fiery face, and a blue steel-shaved but unshaved look? These men were all mirror images of himself. Were all firemen picked then for their looks as well as their proclivities? The color of cinders and ash about them and the continual smell of burning from their pipes kept in Beatty there, rising in the thunderheads of tobacco smoke. Beatty opened a fresh tobacco packet, crumpling the cellophane into a sound of fire. Montag looked at the cards in his own hands. I've been thinking about the fire last week, about the man whose library we fixed. What happened to him? They took him screaming off to the asylum. He wasn't insane. Beatty rearranged his cards quietly. Any man's insane who thinks he can fool the government and us. I've tried to imagine, said Montag, just how it would feel. I mean, to have firemen burn our houses and our books. We haven't any books. But if we did have some, you got some? Beatty blinked slowly. No. Montag gazed beyond them to the wall with the typed lists of 1,000,000 forbidden books. Their names leapt in the fire, burning down the years under his axe, and his hose which sprayed not water but kerosene. No. But in his mind a cool wind started up and blew out of the ventilator grill at home, softly, softly, chilling his face. And again he saw himself in a green park talking to an old man, a very old man, and the wind from the park was cold, too. Montag hesitated. Was it always like this? The firehouse? Our work? I mean, well, once upon a time... Once upon a time? Beatty said. What kind of talk is that? Fool, thought Montag to himself. You'll give it away. At last the fire, a book of fairy tales. He'd glanced at a single line. I mean, he said, in the old days before homes were completely fireproofed. Suddenly it seemed a much younger voice was speaking for him. He opened his mouth, and it was Clarice McClellan saying, Don't firemen prevent fires rather than stoke them up and get them going? That's rich. Stoneman and Black drew forth their rule books, which also contained brief histories of the firemen of America, and laid them out where Montag, though long familiar with them, might read. Established, 1790, to burn English-influenced books in the colonies. First fireman, Benjamin Franklin. Rule 1, answer the alarm swiftly. Rule 2, start the fire swiftly. 3, burn everything. 4, report back to the firehouse immediately. 5, stand alert for other alarms. Everyone watched Montag. He did not move.